"You're overreacting, Harold." Those were the first words my wife said after I asked why my son-in-law was leaving my house at 6:30 in the morning wearing yesterday's clothes. Jason froze halfway down the front porch steps with his truck keys still in his hand. Denise stood behind me in my kitchen wearing my old blue bathrobe, and holding a coffee mug like this was just another normal Tuesday. "He drank too much last night," she said without even blinking. I told him to sleep in the guest room. I remember looking at my daughter's husband standing in my driveway while the morning fog rolled across the lawn, and I swear something in my chest felt cold all at once. Jason wouldn't look me in the eye. "Morning, Mr. Whitmore," he muttered. "Mr. Whitmore. Not Dad anymore. Not Harold. Just Mr. Whitmore." And somehow that hurt worse than I can explain. Then Denise looked straight at me and said, "You've been suspicious for months. It's getting embarrassing." I didn't say anything after that. I just nodded once and stepped aside so Jason could leave my house. But the second I heard his truck pull away, I realized my family was already falling apart, and I was the last person they expected to notice. Before I tell you what happened next, I just want to say this. If this story truly resonates with you, only if it speaks to your heart, please take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. I always read those comments late at night when I can't sleep, and somehow it reminds me the world is bigger than one bad family. My name is Harold Whitmore. I'm 71 years old, and this is the story of the week my wife destroyed our marriage, my son-in-law betrayed my daughter, and I discovered that the people sitting at my dinner table had been lying to me for a very long time. It started 10 days before the divorce meeting. Back then, I still believed my family was normal. Not perfect, just normal. Denise and I had been married for 27 years. We lived in a 2-story brick house outside Columbus, Ohio, with a long gravel driveway and a backyard big enough for family cookouts every summer. I built that house myself when I was 42. Every inch of it. The cabinets in the kitchen, the oak staircase, the deck out back where my daughter Emily used to chase fireflies when she was little. I thought those things meant something to people. Maybe that sounds stupid now. Emily and Jason came over almost every Sunday. Jason worked in commercial real estate and liked to act like the smartest guy in every room. Expensive watches, perfect haircut, always talking about investments and market trends like the rest of us were too dumb to understand money. Denise loved that about him. She laughed at everything he said. At first I thought she was just trying to be supportive because Emily's marriage had been rocky lately. They'd been arguing about money for months. Jason was always chasing some new business deal. Emily looked exhausted most of the time. One night during dinner she said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a stranger." Jason laughed and reached for another beer. "That's marriage, Em." Denise laughed too. I still remember that. My own wife laughing while my daughter looked like she wanted to cry. Little things started bothering me after that. Denise began dressing differently around the house. More makeup, different perfume. She started keeping her phone face down on the kitchen counter. And Jason, he got too comfortable, opening my refrigerator without asking, staying late after Emily left early for work. One Sunday night, I came downstairs around midnight because I couldn't sleep, and I found the television on in the den. Denise and Jason were sitting together in the dark. Too close. Neither of them noticed me standing there at first. Then Denise jumped slightly and grabbed the remote. "You scared me," she said. Jason stood up immediately. "I should probably head home." I remember staring at the 2 empty wine glasses on the coffee table. "Where's Emily?" I asked. Jason cleared his throat. "She wasn't feeling well." Denise wouldn't look at me. And that was the exact moment I started realizing there was something moving underneath my family like a crack spreading through ice. Something quiet and ugly that everybody else could already see except me. What I didn't know yet was that someone inside that house had already made a plan for my money, my marriage, and my future, and my name was all over it. I grew up believing that if you worked hard enough, your family would respect you for it someday. My father was a welder in Dayton, Ohio, and my mother cleaned motel rooms off Interstate 75. We did not have much. Our kitchen ceiling leaked every spring, and in the winter my father used to stuff old towels under the front door to stop the cold air from getting in. But every Friday night, no matter how tired he was, he sat at the dinner table wearing the same grease-stained work shirt and said, "A man takes care of his family first. Everything else comes second." I believed that with my whole heart. By the time I was 25, I was framing houses 6 days a week. 10 hours a day sometimes. 12 if the weather held up. I wrecked my shoulders carrying lumber before I turned 40. Denise used to rub heating cream into my back while we watched television at night. One day all this hard work is going to pay off, she would whisper. Back then, I believed her too. Emily was born 2 years later. I still remember holding her in the hospital while Denise slept beside me. Tiny little thing. Red cheeks. Curled fists. I promised myself right there that my daughter would never grow up worrying about money the way I did. Everything I built after that was for her. The construction company. The house. The savings accounts. Even the lake cabin I bought years later. Every nail I hammered felt tied to my family somehow. Emily was always closer to me than Denise was, especially when she was younger. Saturday mornings she used to ride in my truck with me to job sites wearing those oversized pink earmuffs because she said the saws were too loud. I would buy her hot chocolate at the gas station afterward, and she would sit there swinging her little boots while telling me stories about school. One winter when she was about 8 years old, she asked me, "Daddy, are we rich?" I laughed so hard coffee almost came out of my nose. "No, sweetheart. We are comfortable." She thought about that for a second and said, "Good. Rich people seem mean." Funny thing is, she turned out kinder than almost everybody else in that family. Denise changed slowly over the years. It was not one big moment. More like layers. At first, she just complained more. The house was too small. My truck looked cheap. She hated that I still wore old flannel shirts even after the business became successful. Then social media came along, and suddenly she cared about appearances constantly. Granite countertops, luxury vacations, country club dinners. One night she looked around our kitchen and said, "Do you realize most people our age have upgraded by now?" I remember staring at her because all I could think was upgraded from what? From the home we built together? Emily hated those conversations. "Mom, why are you always acting embarrassed about normal stuff?" she snapped once during Thanksgiving dinner. Denise rolled her eyes. "Because your father still thinks life is 1987. Jason came into the picture about 3 years after that. Emily met him at a real estate fundraiser downtown. The first time he shook my hand, he squeezed too hard. Men notice things like that. "Sir, your daughter talks about you nonstop," he said with that polished salesman smile. Denise loved him instantly. Finally, she whispered to me that night after they left, "Emily found someone ambitious." I should have noticed the way she said that. Like ambition mattered more than character. At first, Jason acted respectful around me. He called me sir, asked questions about business, pretended to admire my work ethic. But little cracks started showing fast. One afternoon at a barbecue, he walked through my backyard looking at the property line and said, "This land alone is probably worth over $1 million now." I laughed awkwardly and said, "I do not really think about it that way." Jason smiled while sipping his beer. Successful people always say that. Denise laughed harder at that joke than she had laughed at anything I said in months. And standing there by my own grill with smoke blowing into my face, I suddenly realized something uncomfortable. They were starting to speak the same language, and I was no longer part of the conversation. About 6 months before everything exploded, my company landed the biggest contract we had signed in almost a decade. A commercial development project outside Cincinnati. 3 buildings. 18 months of work. Good money. The kind of deal that makes people suddenly pay attention to you again. I had technically stepped back from day-to-day operations years earlier, but I still owned the majority of the business, and every major decision came across my desk. When the paperwork finalized, my office manager Linda called me and said, "Harold, congratulations. This one changes things." I remember sitting alone in my office after hours looking out at the parking lot while snow fell under the streetlights. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt tired. Success hits different when you are young. At 71, you mostly think about who you are leaving things to. That night, I took Denise to dinner at a steakhouse downtown to celebrate. White tablecloths. Piano music in the corner. She wore a black dress I had not seen in years. For the first 20 minutes, everything almost felt normal again. Then she asked, "How much is the contract worth exactly?" I laughed a little. "You sound like my accountant." "I am serious, Harold. A few million over time." Her eyes widened slightly. "Wow. That was it. Not congratulations. Not you earned it. Just wow." Then she pulled out her phone and texted someone while I was talking. I stopped mid-sentence. "Everything okay?" She looked up fast. "What? You seem distracted." "I am listening." But she was not. A week later, Emily and Jason came over for dinner, and somehow the contract came up again. Jason leaned back in his chair smiling. That project probably doubled the company valuation overnight. I shrugged. Maybe on paper. He pointed his fork at me. You know what your problem is? You still think like a working-class guy. Denise laughed immediately. I tell him that all the time. Emily looked uncomfortable. Can we not turn dinner into Shark Tank? Jason ignored her. I am serious, though. Harold could sell the company tomorrow and retire somewhere in Florida. Denise looked at me strangely after he said that. Not lovingly. More like she was measuring something. Later that night, while I loaded the dishwasher, I overheard Jason and Denise talking quietly on the back deck. I was not trying to eavesdrop. Their voices just carried through the screen door. He has no idea what he is sitting on, Jason said softly. Denise answered too quietly for me to hear everything, but I caught one sentence clearly. He trusts me. Then both of them stopped talking at the same time. I stood there frozen, holding a wet dinner plate in my hand. A second later, Jason walked back inside, smiling too quickly. Need help with those dishes, Harold? No, I said. I got it. He nodded once, but he would not meet my eyes. After that, little things started piling up fast. Denise suddenly became interested in our finances after ignoring them for years. She started asking questions about trusts, retirement accounts, ownership percentages. One afternoon, she sat beside me on the couch and casually asked, if something happened to you, how complicated would everything be legally? I remember staring at the television without really seeing it. What kind of question is that? She shrugged. I am just thinking ahead. Thinking ahead. Those words stuck with me. Emily seemed more stressed every week too. She started calling me late at night, sometimes just to vent. Dad, I do not know what is going on with Jason lately, she whispered during one phone call. He is distracted all the time. He barely comes home before 10. I almost told her then. Almost. But I did not even know what I was accusing him of yet. All I had were feelings. Looks. Strange conversations. The kind of things people dismiss until it is too late. Then one Thursday morning, everything changed because Denise left her phone charging beside the coffee maker, and a message appeared on the screen that should never have existed. I still remember the sound Denise's phone made when the message appeared. Just one soft vibration against the granite countertop. That was it. One tiny sound that ended 27 years of marriage. I was standing barefoot in the kitchen pouring coffee when the screen lit up beside me. Jason's name appeared. First, then the message underneath it. Last night was worth every risk. I did not touch the phone. I did not need to. The words were already burned into my brain before the screen went dark again. For a few seconds, I honestly thought I might pass out. Not from anger. From confusion. Real confusion. The kind where your body knows something terrible happened before your mind catches up. Denise came downstairs a minute later wearing gray sweatpants and one of my old Ohio State shirts. She smiled when she saw me. You are up early. I stared at her across the kitchen island. How long has this been going on? Her smile disappeared instantly. What are you talking about? I pointed at the phone. She looked down at it, and I watched the blood drain from her face so fast it almost scared me. Then something happened that I will never forget for the rest of my life. She recovered. Just like that. No panic. No apology. She picked up the phone calmly and crossed her arms. You should not be looking through my messages. I actually laughed because I could not believe what I was hearing. Denise, that message was from Jason. She shrugged once. Shrugged. It is not what you think. Then explain it to me. She looked me dead in the eye and said, you have been paranoid for months. That word hit me hard. Paranoid. Like I was the problem. Like I was some confused old man imagining things in my own house. Did something happen between you and him? I asked quietly. She looked away first. Jason has been helping me emotionally. Emotionally. I remember gripping the edge of the counter because my hands suddenly felt weak. He is married to our daughter. Denise snapped back immediately. Do not start acting self-righteous now, Harold. You checked out of this marriage years ago. I stood there speechless while she kept going. You care more about work than people. You barely even notice me anymore. The crazy part was how rehearsed she sounded. Like she had already practiced this conversation in her head. Then she grabbed her purse and headed for the garage. Before leaving, she stopped near the door and said something that made my stomach turn cold. Maybe if you actually listened to people once in a while, none of this would have happened. Then she drove away. I sat alone in that kitchen for almost an hour staring at my coffee. Eventually, Emily called me around noon. Hey, Dad. Have you seen Jason today? My chest tightened immediately. Why? He never came home last night. I closed my eyes so hard it hurt. He told me he was staying with a client. I could hear how tired she sounded. Something feels off lately. I almost told her everything right there. I almost destroyed her entire world in one phone call. But then she quietly said, I just want my marriage to feel normal again, and I could not do it. Not yet. That evening Jason showed up at my house like nothing happened. He walked into my kitchen carrying a six-pack of beer and smiling casually. Hey, Harold. Harold. Not Dad anymore. Denise stayed close beside him the entire time, almost like they had already become a team. Emily arrived 20 minutes later looking exhausted from work, completely unaware that the two people hugging her hello had betrayed her in the worst possible way. During dinner, Jason kept talking about investment properties while Denise laughed at every joke he made. At one point, Emily got frustrated and said, Can somebody please stop talking about money for 5 minutes? The table went quiet. Then Denise looked at her own daughter and said, Maybe if you worried more about finances, your marriage would not be struggling. Emily looked stunned. Wow, Mom. Jason immediately jumped in. She did not mean it like that. But he was smiling slightly when he said it. I saw it. I saw both of them. And sitting there at the head of my own table while my daughter tried not to cry into her mashed potatoes, I realized something horrifying. This was bigger than an affair. They were already rewriting the story, making me the distant husband, making Emily the unstable wife, building a version of reality where they were somehow the victims. And the worst part was, people were starting to believe them. For the next 4 days, I barely slept. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above the bed, while Denise slept facing the opposite wall with her phone tucked under her pillow like she was hiding state secrets. Every sound in the house started feeling different to me. Cabinet doors closing, text message vibrations, her footsteps downstairs at midnight. It was like once the lie revealed itself, I could suddenly hear all the smaller lies underneath it too. I kept trying to fix things anyway. That is the pathetic part nobody talks about. Even after betrayal, part of you still wants your family back. The morning after I saw the message, I sent Denise an email while she was out shopping. I kept it simple. I know something is wrong between us. I am asking you honestly to tell me the truth before this destroys our family. She replied 40 minutes later with one sentence. You are making problems where there are none. That sentence sat in my inbox like poison. That same night, I tried talking to Jason alone out in the driveway while Emily was inside helping Denise clean up dinner. The air smelled like rain and wet grass. Jason leaned against his truck, checking his phone, while I stood there with my hands in my jacket pockets, trying not to shake from anger. I need you to tell me the truth, I said quietly. He sighed immediately like I was inconveniencing him. Harold, with all due respect, I think you are reading into things. You stayed overnight in my house. Because I drank too much. And the message? He looked me straight in the eye. Denise has been helping me through a rough time with Emily. I actually stared at him in disbelief. Helping you? You know how emotional Emily gets. The second he said that, something inside me hardened a little. Not because of the affair. Because of the disrespect. The calmness. The way he was willing to make my own daughter sound unstable just to protect himself. Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. You should be careful about accusations, Harold. Families can fall apart fast. I still think about that sentence sometimes. It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. After that conversation, I started noticing how coordinated they were becoming. Denise stopped arguing with me completely. That was the strangest part. 27 years of marriage. And suddenly she became calm all the time. Cold calm. The kind that feels rehearsed. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and she quickly turned her phone screen away from me. Who keeps texting you? I asked. She shrugged. Friends. What friends? You do not know everybody in my life, Harold. Another lie. Another tiny cut. Emily kept calling me during all of this, and every phone call broke my heart more than the last. Dad, Jason barely touches me anymore, she whispered one night while crying softly. Do you think he regrets marrying me? I sat in my truck outside the hardware store gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. No, sweetheart, I lied. Marriage just goes through rough seasons. Mom says I overthink everything. Of course she did. Denise was already preparing the ground underneath Emily too, making her doubt herself, making her feel emotionally unstable so nobody would question the real betrayal happening right in front of her. A few days later, I found something else. Denise had printed divorce attorney contact information and left it inside her nightstand drawer. Not hidden, almost like she wanted me to find it. I carried the paper downstairs and placed it on the kitchen counter. You planning something? I asked. She barely looked up from her coffee. Maybe I am finally planning my future. With Jason. That finally got a reaction. Her eyes narrowed instantly. You need help, Harold? Answer the question. I am done talking about this. Then she stood up and left the room while my own wife made me feel like a stranger inside my own home. That night, I sat alone on the back deck for almost 3 hours listening to the wind move through the trees behind the property. No television, no music, just silence. Inside the house, I could hear Denise laughing softly on the phone with someone upstairs. I already knew who it was, but somehow hearing that laugh hurt more than the lies themselves, because I realized she had stopped mourning our marriage long before I even knew it was dying. The divorce conversation finally happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon while I was trying to fix a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen. Funny that. Things you remember. I had a screwdriver in my hand when Denise walked in and said, "We need to talk." Those 4 words can empty a room faster than fire. She stood across from me wearing a cream-colored sweater I bought her for Christmas 2 years earlier. Calm face, arms folded, like she had rehearsed every sentence already. "I think we both know this marriage has been over for a long time," she said. I kept tightening the screw without looking at her. "Does Emily know?" Silence. Then she sighed heavily like I was making things difficult. "This is not about Emily." I finally looked up. "The hell it is." Denise rubbed her forehead dramatically. "You always do this. Everything becomes emotional with you." Emotional? I almost laughed. My wife was having an affair with our daughter's husband, and somehow I was still the unreasonable one. "Are you in love with him?" I asked quietly. She did not answer right away, which was answer enough. Then she said something I do not think I will ever fully forget. "Jason listens to me." That one sentence hurt more than the cheating itself, because suddenly every year of my marriage got reduced down to a simple accusation that I had failed her somehow. I set the screwdriver down carefully because my hands had started shaking. "You are blowing up our family." Denise looked away toward the rain hitting the kitchen windows. Maybe this family was already broken. 2 days later, she moved into the downstairs guest room. Emily still knew nothing. That part destroyed me the most. My daughter kept calling her mother for advice about fixing her marriage while her mother was secretly helping destroy it. One Sunday afternoon, Emily showed up alone carrying grocery bags because she wanted to cook dinner for us. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "Jason says he needs space," she whispered while chopping onions beside me. I could barely breathe hearing that. Denise walked into the kitchen then wearing makeup and perfume even though we were not going anywhere. Emily looked at her hopefully. "Mom, do you think he still loves me?" Denise hesitated for half a second too long. Then she said, "Sometimes people outgrow relationships." I watched Emily's face crumble in real time. "What does that mean?" Denise grabbed a glass from the cabinet without making eye contact. "It means marriage is complicated." I had to leave the room after that. I went out to the garage and sat inside my truck with the engine off for almost an hour because I could not stand hearing my own daughter get emotionally buried alive by her own mother. A few nights later, I woke up around 1 in the morning and noticed Denise was not in the guest room. The bed was untouched. I walked downstairs slowly through the dark house, hearing soft voices outside near the back patio. Denise and Jason were sitting together under the porch light. He was holding her hand, just sitting there openly now like they were tired of pretending. "We cannot keep hiding this forever," Jason whispered. Denise squeezed his hand gently. "Once the divorce is final, none of this will matter." I stood there in the hallway listening to the woman I spent almost 3 decades loving talk about erasing me like I was paperwork. I did not interrupt them. I just walked back upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed until sunrise. That was the lowest point of my life. Not anger, not rage, just emptiness. The kind that settles into your bones quietly. By morning, I realized something important, though. Denise and Jason had already accepted the end of my life as they knew it. They thought I was broken, passive, too old to fight back. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I stopped trying to save my marriage. After that night, I stopped trying to fix things that no longer wanted to be fixed. The house felt different in a way I cannot fully explain, like every room had already accepted I was becoming a guest in my own life. Denise and Jason became more open after that, not in public, not in front of Emily, but in small moments that only someone living inside the same walls would notice. Shared glances that lasted too long. Conversations that stopped the second I entered a room. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and Jason was already there, sitting at my table scrolling through his phone like it belonged to him. "Morning, Harold," he said. Without looking up, I nodded once and poured myself coffee. Denise came in a few seconds later and kissed him on the cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then she turned to me and said, "Do you mind if Jason uses the driveway space? His car is parked on the street." I just stared at her for a moment. "It is my driveway." She sighed. "You are being difficult again." That was the new pattern. Anything I disagreed with became me being difficult. Anything I questioned became paranoia. Emily was still in the dark, but she was unraveling slowly. One evening, she showed up at my house alone and sat on the porch steps without saying anything for almost a full minute. "Dad," she finally said, "do you think I am crazy?" I turned toward her immediately. "No. Why would you say that?" She rubbed her eyes like she had not slept in days. "Jason keeps saying I overreact. Mom says I need to stop being so emotional. I do not even know what is real anymore." I sat down beside her. "Emily, listen to me." She looked at me like she was holding on to my next words for survival. I almost told her everything then. Almost. But instead I said, "You are not crazy. You are tired." She nodded slowly, but I could see she did not fully believe me. That scared me more than anything. Meanwhile, something strange started happening at work. My old company, Whitmore Construction, still had ongoing projects even though I had stepped back years ago. One morning, my former operations manager Linda called me. "Harold, are you aware there is a request being made to review your ownership structure?" I frowned. "From who?" A pause. "Your wife." I closed my eyes. Of course. Denise was not just leaving me. She was organizing everything around me like I was a financial obstacle to be removed cleanly. "And Jason has been advising her," Linda added carefully. That was the moment I understood the full shape of what was happening. This was not just emotional betrayal. It was strategic. That afternoon, I met privately with my attorney, Martin Keller, at a small office downtown. He was an older man, calm, precise. He listened without interrupting while I explained everything. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Harold, I am going to ask you something important. Are you prepared for what this could become legally?" I nodded. "I already lost my family. I am just not losing everything else." He studied me for a long moment. "Then we need to start documenting everything immediately." That word changed everything. Documenting. Suddenly my life was no longer just pain. It was evidence. Over the next week, I stopped reacting and started observing. I recorded conversations when legally appropriate. I saved messages. I wrote down timelines. I let Denise talk without interruption when she tried to rewrite reality. One night she said to me, "You should be grateful I stayed this long." I replied quietly, "I think you will regret saying that." She laughed. Jason laughed too when she told him later. But something shifted in how they looked at me after that. Less dismissal, more caution, like they were beginning to sense I was no longer playing the role they assigned me. At work, I started rebuilding focus too. I met with contractors again. I reviewed unfinished bids. I reactivated accounts I had ignored for years. One of my old partners, Steve, called me and said, "It is good to hear you sound like yourself again." I told him, "I am not sure I ever stopped being myself. I just stopped defending it." By the end of that week, I had quietly prepared something that neither Denise nor Jason had any awareness of. They thought I was retreating, but I was not retreating at all. I was positioning, and the first real move was already in motion, waiting for the right moment to surface. The first time I walked into the new office wearing my updated field jacket with the Whitmore Construction insignia stitched clean over the chest pocket, I did not feel like the same man who sat alone in his kitchen a few weeks earlier wondering where his life had gone. The building was smaller than I remembered, but everything inside felt sharper, more intentional. The kind of place where decisions actually mattered. Linda stood up the moment I entered the conference room. "Harold, it is good to see you back in here." I nodded and adjusted the ID badge clipped to my jacket. It still felt slightly foreign, like it belonged to someone I used to know. "Let us get to work," I said simply. No hesitation, no explanation, just forward motion. We spent the morning reviewing contracts for the Cincinnati development project. 3 buildings, 18 months of execution. The same project that had once been a celebration now felt like something else entirely. A line in the sand. During the meeting, one of the junior engineers looked at me and said, "I did not realize you were still actively involved in operations, sir." I glanced down at my badge before answering. I was never out of it. Just quieter. That sentence landed differently than I expected. People started treating me differently after that moment. Not because I raised my voice or demanded attention, but because I stopped stepping aside. By the afternoon, I was back on site. Steel framing already up on the first building. Hard hats everywhere. The smell of sawdust and concrete dust mixing in the air. One of the foremen called out, "Mr. Whitmore, we were not expecting you today." I looked around at the half-finished structure and said, "I expect myself everywhere. I still have my name on the paperwork." A few workers chuckled, but respectfully. That was the difference now. Respect, not familiarity. As I walked the site, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Denise. 5 missed calls. Then a message. "We need to talk about the financial review immediately." I stared at the screen for a moment and put the phone back in my pocket. No response. Not anymore. When I returned home that evening, Jason's car was in the driveway again. He was sitting in my kitchen with a laptop open, talking to Denise like he had always belonged there. "If we restructure the holdings properly, we can free up liquidity within 60 days, he was saying. Denise nodded like she understood everything. I stood in the doorway watching for a few seconds before Jason finally noticed me. "Oh, Harold. We were just discussing some family planning." He said family planning like I was already excluded from it. I walked past him and poured a glass of water. "Funny," I said. "I did not realize I was invited." Denise sighed immediately. "Here we go." Jason closed his laptop slowly. "We are trying to make things easier for everyone." I took a sip of water and looked at him. Everyone except me. Silence. That was becoming the pattern. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Emily called me while I was at the office. Her voice was different. Quieter. Controlled. "Dad, can I come see you alone?" she asked. I immediately said yes. 2 hours later, she arrived at the site wearing her work uniform from the hospital where she volunteered part-time. She looked smaller somehow, standing among the steel beams and construction noise. "What is going on?" she asked as soon as we stepped aside. I studied her face carefully. "What do you think is going on?" She hesitated. "Mom says you are preparing to punish her financially." I almost laughed but stopped myself. "Do you believe that?" Emily looked down at the ground. "I do not know what to believe anymore." That sentence hit me harder than anything else, because I realized the damage was no longer just between adults. It was spreading, quietly, systematically. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded document. "Emily, I want you to read something later. Not now. Just when you are ready." She looked at it like it was dangerous. "What is it?" "Truth," I said simply. She did not take it right away. Not yet. But I could see something shifting in her eyes. Doubt breaking through denial. That evening, as I stood alone on the second floor of the unfinished building watching the city lights flicker on in the distance, I realized something had already changed permanently. I was no longer reacting to what they were doing. I was operating beyond them now. And back at the house, without knowing it yet, Denise and Jason were about to walk straight into the part of my plan they had already underestimated. The first thing I noticed when I arrived at the hospital that morning was how clean everything looked under the fluorescent lights. Too clean. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes every footstep sound like it belongs to someone else's life. Emily had asked me to meet her there instead of at the house, and that alone told me everything I needed to know about how fragile things had become. I stood near the entrance for a moment, holding the folded document I had given her earlier in my jacket pocket, feeling its weight like it had changed shape overnight. When she finally appeared at the end of the hallway, she looked like she had not slept in days. Her hospital badge hung slightly crooked on her scrubs. "Dad," she said as she reached me, her voice uncertain. I read it. I nodded slowly. "And?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I do not understand what I am looking at." That was when I realized she was standing at the edge of something she did not have language for yet. "Come with me," I said quietly. We sat down in a small waiting area near the windows overlooking the parking lot. Cars moved slowly outside, people living normal lives without knowing what was happening inside my family. Emily kept glancing at the document in her hands. "This says Mom has been transferring discussions about assets with Jason," she asked, her voice tightening. I did not answer immediately. "It says a lot more than that." I finally said. She looked up at me sharply. Dad, are you accusing them of something? I leaned forward slightly. I am showing you what is already documented. Her breathing changed. Faster now. Mom would never do something like this, she said, but it sounded less like conviction and more like repetition, like something she had told herself too many times. Before I could respond, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and immediately stood up. It is Mom, she whispered. I watched her answer. Hey, Mom. Yes, I am with him. No, I do not know yet. What do you mean we need to handle this? Her eyes slowly lifted toward me as she listened. I could hear Denise's voice faintly through the speaker, even from where I was sitting. Not the words, just the tone. Controlled, careful, like she was managing a situation rather than talking to her daughter. Emily ended the call and sat back down slowly. She wants me to meet her and Jason at the house tonight, she said. I studied her face carefully. Do you want me to come with you? She hesitated for a long time. No, she said finally. I need to hear this myself. That answer scared me more than anything else so far, because it meant she still believed there might be a version of this story where everyone could stay intact. That evening I stayed at the office longer than usual. The construction site was quiet, lights dimmed, workers gone. I stood alone on the second floor of the unfinished building, looking down at the empty frame of what would eventually become something permanent. My phone buzzed twice. Unknown numbers. Then a message from Denise. Emily is coming home. Do not interfere. I read it twice. Then I put the phone away. Around the same time, I knew Emily was pulling into the driveway of the house I had built with my own hands. I could picture it too clearly. The porch light on. Jason's car already there. Denise waiting inside like she had rehearsed every expression she would need. I sat down on a stack of lumber and just waited. Not for action, for truth. Because I could feel it now, closing in from all sides. The kind of truth that does not arrive gently. The kind that changes the air in a room before anyone even speaks. My phone lit up again. This time it was Emily. One-word text. Dad. And then nothing else. Just silence after that, stretching longer than it should have. As I stared at the screen, knowing whatever she had walked into inside that house was already unfolding without me. And I had no idea which version of my family I was about to lose forever. The moment I arrived at the house, I already knew something had changed. The front door was not fully closed, just slightly open, like someone had walked through it too quickly to care about shutting it properly. No lights were on upstairs, only the faint glow from the kitchen spilling into the hallway. I stepped inside slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I understood something was already over before I even saw it. I could hear voices coming from the living room. Not loud, not chaotic, controlled. That was the part that unsettled me the most. Denise was speaking first. Emily, try to understand this is complicated. Jason followed immediately after. We are trying to protect everyone from making emotional decisions. Emotional decisions. I stopped just outside the doorway. Emily was sitting on the couch, hands folded tightly in her lap, staring at the floor. She looked smaller than she had that morning. Not physically, emotionally, like something inside her had collapsed. When I finally stepped into the room, all three of them turned toward me at the same time. No surprise, no panic, just awareness, like they had been expecting this exact moment. Denise exhaled slowly. You are not supposed to be here. I nodded once. I know. Jason stood near the window, arms crossed, trying to maintain the same calm expression he always used when negotiating something he thought he controlled. Harold, this is a private family conversation. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said quietly, that is interesting, because I built this house. Silence followed. Emily finally looked up at me. Her eyes were red, but she was not crying anymore. That part surprised me. Dad, she said softly, why did you not tell me earlier? I walked further into the room and stopped near the coffee table. Because I was waiting for you to see it yourself. Denise immediately interrupted. See what? You are destroying this family over assumptions. I reached into my jacket and placed the folder on the table. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just calmly. Jason glanced at it, but did not touch it. You really should not be escalating this, he said. I nodded slightly. I am not escalating anything. I am ending confusion. Emily reached for the folder first. Her hands were shaking now. She opened it slowly. The room went quieter as she read. Page after page. Notes. Records. Transactions. Conversations. I watched her face change in real time. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something heavier, something final. Mom, she whispered without looking up. Denise stepped forward quickly. That is taken out of context. Jason added immediately. Emily, you need to understand how these documents are interpreted. Emily closed the folder sharply. The sound echoed through the room. Then she stood up, slowly, like she was trying not to fall apart. No, she said. Just that. One word. Denise's expression shifted slightly. Emily, calm down. Do not tell me to calm down, Emily replied quietly, but there was steel in her voice now. She turned toward Jason first. Did you ever actually care about me? Jason hesitated, just for a second. But I saw it. Of course I do, he said carefully. Emily shook her head. You do not even sound sure. Then she turned to Denise. The room felt like it was holding its breath. And you, Emily said, her voice breaking slightly. You told me I was overreacting. You told me I was unstable. You let me think I was the problem. Denise tried to speak. That is not what happened. Emily cut her off. Then explain it. Silence. No answer came. That silence did more damage than any confession could have. I stepped forward slightly, but did not intervene. This was not mine to carry anymore. Emily looked at both of them one last time. I came here tonight hoping someone would tell me I was wrong, she said quietly. But nobody even tried. Jason finally spoke again. Emily, you are making this worse than it is. She laughed once. Not amused. Just broken. Worse than it is. She looked at him directly now. You are sleeping with my mother. The words hung in the air without reaction at first. Denise closed her eyes. Jason did not move. And in that moment, everything that had been hidden, rewritten, and denied finally stopped working. Emily turned toward me. Not angry. Not confused anymore. Just tired. Dad, she said softly. I do not know what happens next. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and for the first time since this began, I saw something clear instead of chaos. That is because this is not the end of the story, I said quietly. It is the beginning of the part they did not expect. Jason's phone buzzed on the table. Once. Then again. He looked down at it. His face changed. Denise saw it too. And for the first time, neither of them had anything to say. After that night, nothing inside that house felt the same again, not because anyone was shouting or breaking things, but because silence had changed shape. It was no longer peaceful silence. It was final silence. Emily stayed seated on the couch for a long time after the truth was spoken, staring at a point on the floor like she was trying to understand how something so large could fit inside a normal living room. Denise stood near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed tightly, no longer speaking unless spoken to. Jason stayed by the window, checking his phone again and again, as if waiting for something outside to rescue him from the room he could no longer control. I was the only one who moved. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and then returned calmly to the center of the room. This is what is going to happen, I said quietly. All three of them looked at me, not because I raised my voice, but because I did not. That seemed to matter more. Jason finally spoke first. Harold, you are not in a position to dictate anything. I nodded slowly. I am not dictating. I am informing. Denise let out a short breath. You think you can just control everything because you are angry? I looked at her. No, I think I can control it because I own it. That sentence landed differently. Emily looked up at me immediately. What does that mean? She asked. I turned slightly toward her. It means you are not losing your home. You are not being pushed out of anything. But the people who thought they were going to rewrite this family are going to find out they cannot. Jason tried to interrupt. This is not how assets work, Harold. I raised my hand slightly, not aggressively, just enough to stop him. I have already spoken to legal counsel. Everything has been documented. Everything has been reviewed. Denise's expression tightened. You are trying to punish me. I shook my head. No, I stopped trying to punish anyone a long time ago. Emily stood up slowly. Mom, is any of this true? Denise hesitated. That hesitation answered more than words ever could. Emily, I did not mean for things to get complicated, she said carefully. Jason stepped forward. We all made mistakes here. I looked at him. No, some people made choices. Others are just now discovering them. The room fell quiet again. Emily turned away from both of them and walked toward the hallway. I followed her with my eyes, but did not move. Denise called after her. Emily, please do not do this. Emily stopped, but did not turn around. Do not do what? She asked quietly. See clearly? That was the last thing she said before disappearing down the hallway. Jason finally broke the silence again, but his voice had changed now. Less confident, more uncertain. "You are making this worse for everyone," he said. I nodded once. "No, I am just making it real." He stared at me for a moment, then looked away. Denise stepped closer now, her voice lower. "What exactly do you want from this?" I met her eyes. "I want the truth to stop being negotiable." She did not respond. For the first time, she had nothing rehearsed left to say. Later that night, I stood alone in the kitchen after Jason left and Denise went upstairs without speaking. The house felt emptier than it ever had, even though every room was still full of things we owned together. Emily came back briefly to grab her keys. She paused at the door. "Dad," she said softly. I looked at her. She hesitated for a long moment, then added, "I do not know who to trust anymore." I nodded slowly. "Then do not trust words," I said. "Trust what people do when they think nobody is watching." She left without another word. I stood there for a long time after she was gone, listening to the quiet hum of a house that no longer felt like a home. Upstairs, I could hear Denise moving around her room. Somewhere outside, Jason's car finally left the driveway. And for the first time in weeks, there was no confrontation left in the moment. Only distance growing in every direction at once, and the unsettling realization that whatever came next would not be about discovery anymore, but about consequences that none of us were fully ready to face. The house felt different after everything settled, like it had finally stopped pretending to be what it used to be. Denise moved out quietly 2 weeks later without any announcement, just boxes disappearing one by one from the hallway, until her presence was reduced to empty shelves and a faint perfume that eventually faded into nothing. Jason was gone even faster. No confrontation, no final speech, just absence. Emily stopped coming around for a while after that first night. I do not blame her. There are some truths that take longer to heal than they do to reveal. For a while it was just me in the house I built, walking through rooms that no longer carried arguments or laughter, only memory. I spent mornings sitting at the kitchen table with black coffee, listening to the refrigerator hum, realizing that silence can be both punishment and peace depending on how you choose to carry it. Slowly, life started to rebuild itself in smaller, quieter ways. I returned fully to Whitmore construction, not as the man I was before, but as someone who finally understood what it meant to stand inside his own decisions again. Meetings became simpler. My voice carried more weight, not because I raised it, but because I no longer doubted it. Linda once told me, "You are different now, Harold." Calmer, but sharper. I did not answer at first. I just nodded because she was right. The change was not in my work. It was in what I refused to tolerate anymore. One afternoon, Emily came back. She did not call first. She just showed up at the front door, holding a small paper bag from a bakery she used to love as a child. She stood there for a moment before speaking. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside immediately. We sat in the kitchen, the same place everything had unraveled months before. She placed the bag on the table, but did not open it. "I left Jason," she said quietly. I closed my eyes for a moment, not in relief, but in understanding of how much that sentence cost her. "I am sorry you had to go through that alone," I said. She shook her head. I was not alone. I just did not want to see it. We sat in silence for a while after that. No accusations. No explanations. Just two people learning how to exist in the aftermath of something they did not choose, but had to survive. "I do not know how to trust people again," she admitted eventually. I looked at her carefully before answering. "You do not have to trust everyone," I said. "Just do not ignore yourself." That was the last real conversation we had for a long time. Months passed. The legal matters concluded quietly, as they often do when truth is finally stronger than manipulation. Nothing dramatic. No victory speech. Just closure on paper. One morning, I found myself alone again in the backyard, standing where I used to watch Emily play when she was little. The grass had grown uneven in places. The fence needed repair. Life continued without asking permission. I noticed something then, something small on the old wooden patio table. It was my father's pocket watch. I had not seen it in years. I picked it up slowly. The glass was slightly scratched, the metal worn smooth from decades of use. It had stopped ticking at some point, but I did not fix it. I just held it in my hand and listened to the silence it carried. Not everything broken needs to be repaired, I realized. Some things are meant to remind you that time moves forward whether you are ready or not. That evening, I sat by the window with that watch in my hand, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. There was no anger left in me anymore, only understanding. And somewhere deep inside that understanding was something even quieter: peace. If there is one thing I learned through all of this, it is that people will test your boundaries when they confuse your patience for permission. They will rewrite your silence as weakness. But silence, when chosen correctly, can also be preparation. For truth, for distance, for a new beginning that no one else gets to define for you. To anyone listening who feels overlooked, dismissed, or replaced inside their own story, I want you to remember this. You are not required to stay where you are not respected. You are not required to explain your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back, observe, and allow truth to reveal itself without forcing it. My name is Harold Whitmore. I am 71 years old, and the core of what I want to leave you with is simple. Do not abandon yourself just to keep others comfortable. And if this story reached you in any way, thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know. If you found meaning here, feel free to share your thoughts below or subscribe for more stories like this, because sometimes hearing someone else's truth helps us understand our own a little better. And as the night settles in, I hope you carry this with you. Even the deepest fractures in a life can become the place where something stronger begins to grow, quietly, patiently, when no one is watching. My name is Harold Whitmore. I am 71 years old, and the core lesson I want to leave you with is that silence can either destroy you or rebuild you, depending on how you use it. And before you go, there are more stories waiting in this channel, each one carrying its own truth, its own breaking point, and its own kind of healing. And if this one stayed with you, the next one might speak even closer to what you are still trying to understand.